when it comes to the VP and owning a gun, she can speak for herself. The campaign can speak for that. Her office can speak for that. I'm not. That's for them to speak to.
Well, as you know, Kamala Harris's nickname around Washington, D.C. is Annie Oakley, because she's a rootin', tootin', gun-totin' VP, right? We've always known that about her. Actually, we've never known that about her. But she doesn't hesitate to talk about her gun ownership, the gun she owns. And if you break into her house, she's going to kill you. Even though that's actually kind of against the law in most states. And certainly when she was attorney general in California, she would have thrown you in jail if you tried that. But it doesn't matter, because she's Kamala Harris and she loves guns. Jean-Pierre was asked a very important question about this new narrative coming from the campaign. What kind of gun does she have exactly?
What kind of gun does the vice president have, and when did she buy it?
That's something for her office to speak to.
The reason I'm asking is because you have this event today, but the VP, as district attorney, sponsored Proposition H in 2005, would have banned handguns within San Francisco city limits and required that residents turn in the handguns that they already own by a certain deadline or face mandatory jail time. But she's out on the campaign trail now saying that she's a proud gun owner and is not going to take away your guns. So can the White House get us an answer on that? Because she hasn't, and her campaign officials also haven't answered that question, even on television.
Look, a couple of things here. When it comes to the VP and owning a gun, she can speak for herself. The campaign could speak for that. Her office can speak for that. I'm not. That's for them to speak to.
I'm just the spokesperson for the Biden administration. Don't ask me questions about the vice president. Okay. Matt Foldy, I think that the question here is, after we've now had it revealed that Kamala Harris, as district attorney, sponsored a bill that would have banned the actual gun that she claims she owns, which is a remarkable turn of events. The question is, did she acquire this alleged handgun after she started working at McDonald's or while she was working at McDonald's?
You're talking about such a great point here, because I think this is bigger than just whether or not she owns a gun. I actually happen to think that she does, simply so she can say that she owns one. I also happen to think it's never been opened, it's never been fired, it's never been loaded, the safety's still on and all of that. But I think that this speaks to two problems that she's dealing with in her campaign. One is that she actually doesn't really speak for herself. Jean-Pierre said she can answer that question. Her entire campaign has been run by statements from anonymous aides who have been walking back policies that she's held for the first 59 and a half or however old she is years of her life, saying, oh, she believed all of those things. Well, she doesn't believe that anymore. And then when she is pressed, like in the CNN interview about these radical positions she had, and make no mistake about it, in terms of gun ownership, there would be no gun ownership if she had what she actually wants implemented. And CNN said to her, you believed all these communistic, insane things for your entire career, and now you don't believe them. Is that because you've learned more when you were vice president, which was also a bizarrely patronizing way of asking a fairly, I think, straightforward question? And the other thing is she is trying to reinvent herself more broadly. And that includes, I believe, lying about basic things like working at McDonald's. I don't think she ever did. It was never in any of her bio things. She left it out of a resume that she was required to list all previous employment. My former colleagues at the Free Beacon, Joe Simonson and Andrew Kerr, have been on this. I don't think it's going to hinge the election whether or not Kamala Harris worked at McDonald's. Again, I don't think that she did, but I do think it speaks to the problem that she has in introducing herself to the American people, is that they're trying to sell a product that people are not exactly eager to buy. And whether it's inauthenticity about her employment or maybe about possible gun ownership, she has to try and figure out again how to square that circle.
Well, the fact of the matter is, in states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, not to mention Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona, the Second Amendment's pretty popular. And when a liberal Democrat like Kamala Harris is running as a candidate who wants to ban a certain type of gun, well, she has to offset that by saying, don't get me wrong, I love guns. I've got a gun of my own. The question is, Akash, are people buying this? Because it does sort of factor into this whole underlying notion about Kamala Harris that she's sort of making up this new persona that's very different than just 4 years ago.
I think that's the point that Foldy is making with the employment and this situation, that Republicans are going to seem nitpicky if they're really diving into the details on this particular question. What kind of firearm does she own? When did she work at McDonald's? I think the broader point here is the one that Republicans should be making, right? Which is that she's dishonest, unclear, reinventing herself, and unqualified to be president. There's a broad-based narrative here that needs to be said over and over again and have these examples there to back it up. And then we need to get back to the policies, right? Ultimately, it's not going to be an election based on her personality that Republicans are going to win. Again, we've talked about how people don't like Trump's personality either. And so I'm not sure that's what Republicans should want the election to be decided on. I think that's a certainly important point to make about her. But again, what you do is you have to pivot back to, because of those qualities, she cannot solve the crises that are making your lives worse. In fact, she caused many of them when it comes to inflation and the border and what have you. And she simply cannot be trusted to handle the responsibility that it takes to fix them.
Yeah, Chris, I think, though, the question of believability and authenticity does factor in here, whether that also, as Akash said, it becomes a personality test and is sort of a wash. I mean, I'm hearing from voters, it's like, yeah, I understand why people don't like Donald Trump. I don't always like Donald Trump, but at least he's not a fake. At least he's not a phony. I mean, he's so real. He says stuff I wish he wouldn't say, but there's something refreshing about that.
That's exactly right. You know, he sets in motion something that a lot of people thought was a terrible mistake. And if you heard it once, you heard it 1,000 times. Oh, Trump really stepped in at this time when remember when he went to the National Association of Black Journalists and said, I didn't even know she was black. She used to be Indian. Now she's black. And do you know what that did? That set in motion with many black voters who already thought that she's a phony. And it was just one of many, many things, like the McDonald's thing, like the gun thing, like the 300 different dialects. She'll probably do a John Wayne thing now. Hey, Pilgrim, now with the gun. Like, the woman can't act natural in a bathroom. She's exactly like Hillary Clinton used to be. And I believe ultimately that is what's going to sink her. She doesn't know who she is from one day to the next, and neither do voters.
Real fast, though, Chris, do you think that she does have a gun? Are you like Foldy? It's like, yeah, she's got a gun. She got a gun just so she could say she has a gun.
Our great friend and colleague, Katie Pavlich, beautifully put it this way. You do not boast with glee and excitement about firing a firearm at someone. That's not something you say if you're a legal, responsible firearm owner. You don't say that. So Katie sows real seeds of doubt about that story. I think she's right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, too. And Akash, I get what you're saying. I think that listen, with Kamala Harris and her policies and her lack of experience, it's a target-rich environment. But at the same time, a lot of people vote on likability. A lot of people vote on, I have a gut trust of this person. And the more she says things like this, I think that it does undermine the trust level that people might have with her that may actually help the Trump campaign, because one way to offset some of the unlikability for that candidate is to, well, bring down the likability for the other candidate. It's part of a multifaceted approach when you're running for office, I think, Akash.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think these are points worth making, but I think making the connection is important, right? I guess what I'm getting at is that nitpicking on the details of these things, I don't think helps. I think, describing the narrative that Chris was talking about, which is that ultimately she's a phony and she can't be trusted and she's unqualified. You have got to bring it back to a broader point that needs to connect over and over and over again in the minds of voters, again, along with those policy failures. And I think that could be a winning recipe because it's all true about her. And she is unqualified. She's a phony. She has no business getting anywhere near the presidency.
If you can't trust her on this, how can you trust her on fracking? Yeah, okay. And Foldy, real fast, maybe she got the gun when she got the job at McDonald's because she had to walk home at night. It was the late shift doing the French fries. She wanted a little self-defense and some protection. Is that possible? I mean, I'm just trying to be as generous as possible.
You're painting a scenario that sounds a lot like Jussie Smollett being assaulted by Trump supporters in Chicago. And I lived in Chicago. It's very cold in January at 1:15 in the morning, shouting "It's MAGA country." But it's worth remembering she was one of Jussie Smollett's top defenders.
That's a fair point too. Yeah, and listen, and this could have been when she worked at McDonald's. It could have been when she was in high school. That was in Quebec, the mean streets of Montreal, where, by the way, when they serve fries there, they add gravy to it. That's right. She didn't just give you fries. She gave you poutine. How in the heck can we have a president who worked at a Quebecois McDonald's? America, wake up.